Who are all the offensive skill players I have going in my latest first round mock draft for Sporting News? And what does it look like ahead of the NFL Combine workouts? It's time to break it down right here, right now, as we focus on all the early round players on Locked On Fantasy Football.
Are Locked On Fantasy, your daily NFL fantasy podcast. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network. Your team every day.
Greetings, everyone, and welcome to another edition of the Locked On Fantasy Football Podcast. As usual, I'm your host, Vinnie Iyer. When I'm not doing this, I'm writing about NFL and fantasy football for SportingNews.com. It is Combine time. We're going to have the workout soon. All the players are getting checked in. We have the coaches and GMs speaking, giving us their generic ideas of what they're going to be doing in the upcoming draft. The 2023 edition will be here soon enough, April 27th, less than 2 months away as we're into March now. So it'll be next month at the end of April there. We'll have these players entering the league. So what we're going to do here is I put up a new first and second round mock draft, right? My first 2-round mock draft of the season at sportingnews.com. So you can check that out in detail for all the picks I've made. But here on Locked On Fantasy Football, we are talking about fantasy, so we're going to focus on the offensive skill players I have going in the first round. So today we'll focus on all the good stuff going in the first round, including the 4 quarterbacks that are projected to go there, as well as some interesting talent at wide receiver, tight end, and running back this year. So really, we run the gamut of offensive skill players being selected, all the positions being represented here in some form. So excited about that we're going to have that level of talent coming in the NFL. And don't forget about the second round. We'll break that down and look at the picks that I have there that are on the offensive side for you that are going to catch, run, or throw here to help us in fantasy football going forward. So exciting stuff to break down here. We know it's closer to seeing these rookies in action for real and producing on our fantasy teams. Thanks again for making Locked On Fantasy Football your first listen today. We're free and available to you on all platforms. All right, we'll dive into the picks I have in the top 5 that are offensive related here that are not blockers. You look at the number 1 overall pick currently belongs to the Chicago Bears. So I don't think the Bears are going to hold on to that pick because now there's another curveball here that we'll have to address. That Jalen Carter, a little bit in trouble off the field here, so facing some serious charges with a car incident allegedly. So that's not good necessarily to sit on the best defensive player available. I don't know if Will Anderson Jr. would be interested in going to the Bears. I think he would be, but I don't think the Bears would want to bring it to the other way because they got so many needs here. They would really like to trade down. Maybe they'll get Anderson if they move down a few picks here and go in that direction. So that has to be the direction for now. They're leaning, but they could also trade Justin Fields and take the first quarterback available. The other option is just taking the best player available, as we mentioned, probably defensively with Fields in the mix. They won't go after quarterback, but most likely scenario is going to be drawing a team up to get Bryce Young because there's some questions about the other quarterbacks and really selling that to get multiple first rounders in return, slide down, and really stockpile some talent as a rebuilding team. So either way you look at it, scenario 1, trade Fields and take Young, or trade away the pick, you're going to also have someone else take Young. So Young is the guy I have going number 1. I was able to talk to him last year, really impressed with him, very mature young man. I know he's a little bit slight in size, but he's a winner. He's a leader. He comes from that Alabama offensive pedigree. We know it's been great for Jalen Hurts and Mac Jones. And Tua Tagovailoa had a nice season as well last year. So it is a good pipeline here as they change the offenses here going forward. But when you look at it, it is a great place to find starting quarterbacks in the NFL. And again, Young, I think, might be the best of them all. He's a California kid who came in polished. He won the Heisman early, took advantage of having veteran receivers around him. So I think he's just a special talent. He's a little bit undersized, sure, but gets rid of the ball quickly, good leadership skills, can run pretty well. So good all-around threat here in the passing and running game for Bryce Young. So I don't think it's going to be the Bears taking him, but he's going to go off the board and be in position to produce right away in fantasy because that running floor he's going to add to his passing success here in 2023. All right, next up I have CJ Stroud. If the Texans are not the team that trades up with the Bears to go up one spot to number one, they're sitting at number two. They can simply take CJ Stroud as their quarterback here. They do have D'Amico Ryans taking over as their head coach. Bobby Slowick, he comes over from the 49ers. He'll run a 49ers-like offense here. Stroud can excel in that, and he's a good pocket passer, can move a little bit, and also push the ball downfield, but also can make all the throws here. So that 49ers offense being embraced by Houston, and there's definitely appeal with Stroud. And I don't think it's a big drop-off between Young and Stroud. Stroud was very accomplished at Ohio State in his own right as a passer and was very productive. I think Young just has a little bit more of those intangibles in his favor already. I think Stroud could develop those things. But again, you figure the Texans are going to throw a ton. Their defense is rebuilding under Ryan. So that's why I think Young and Stroud are going to be fantasy names we're going to watch that have some viability, at least in a streaming platoon type situation here. So I do like Stroud be able to make all the throws. The Texans need to upgrade receiving a little bit, especially if Brandon Cooks doesn't want to be there and they've got to move him. They can't just go forward Nico Collins and their tight end mix. I think they really need to look at an upgrade there to help Stroud. So I think Young might end up in a better situation because he'll have a team trade up for him that might have a little bit more around the quarterback. We know the Texans are still sorting that out. So I think Stroud might be a streamer while Young might have some irregular value here. And that's how I break it down between those two. And now, really, if this scenario happens, and this is the final pick that I have in the top five, being an offensive pick, that's Anthony Richardson going to the Colts at number 4. That's very interesting because you got a brain trust offensively of Shane Steichen here. That's going to really help that quarterback. And we know that he had a great effect early with Justin Herbert, did wonders with Jalen Hurts the past 2 years, turning him into an MVP candidate, a strong dual threat. Well, Richardson has a lot of those same qualities, a little bit bigger, definitely stronger, a good runner out of the SEC in Florida here. So really like Richardson rising up the charts here. And again, desperation is going to kick in for some of these teams that need a quarterback. The Colts want to break out of this. We know what they've been in. They've been in the Phillip Rivers, Carson Wentz, Matt Ryan cycle. Since moving on from Jacoby Brissett in the post-Andrew Luck era, they want to get their franchise quarterback here and correct things. And they have some good weapons here, so that's the difference. Like, I think Young, TBD, where he lands, you would say the Colts definitely have better weapons than the Texans. When you have Michael Pittman Jr. and Alec Pierce, we'll see if they bring back Paris Campbell in the middle with his quickness in the slot. You know, Jonathan Taylor is a very good receiver when needed here, and their tight ends, a little bit of depth there. So, and offensive line could also rebound with Quentin Nelson and the rest. So Richardson would step into a higher upside situation than even Young here if the Colts there. If it's Young to the Colts and the Colts move up to get him, Young is looking really good here. But Colts situation, you have to say, again, we don't know what team's going to take Young. If it's the Bears staying put and doing it, I think the Colts have better passing weapons there for sure. And Young would be a lot in the Justin Fields mode if he was drafted to replace Fields and they moved on. So the Colts definitely the most appealing and can yield the best fantasy value here. So that's all I have it in my mock draft of the top 5. My skill players are all quarterbacks. Bryce Young to the Bears / another team. CJ Stroud to the Texans / another team. And Anthony Richardson for now, number 4 overall to the Colts. Now we'll break down the other guys that I have going in the top half of the first round that are offensive skill players in my latest mock draft for Sporting News as the Combine kicks off in Indianapolis. It is the end of football season here for a while, even though we're talking draft and all that good stuff. We have broken down for you the draft futures there on FanDuel Sportsbook, but we know it's also a hot time in the NBA after the All-Star break. Things are heating up with Kevin Durant taking the court for the first time for the Phoenix Suns. So it's midway point in the season. Perfect time to download FanDuel, America's #1 sportsbook, because new customers can get a no-sweat first bet up to $1,000. That's bonus bets back $1,000 if your first bet doesn't win, up to that. Just download the FanDuel Sportsbook app. It's safe, secure, and super easy to use. Then you can bet on everything from the money line to point scores and threes drain. That's always interesting with Durant, with his scoring and ability beyond the arc here. So the Suns should be a team that gets a lot more attention as we keep going forward here. The Bucks, another contender. We got the Celtics and Jason Tatum. We had Damian Lillard put up a big game of the 70-pointer for the Trailblazers. So a lot of excitement here with the scoring and the players. And you can combine a lot of the attributes of these star players, because FanDuel lets you even combine your bets for a chance of bigger payout with the same game parlay. So don't miss the chance to get your no sweat first bet up to $1,000 in bonus bets when you go to FanDuel.com/lockedon. That's FanDuel.com/lockedon to learn more. Make every moment more with FanDuel, an official sports betting partner of the NBA, as well as NFL and the Locked On Network. All right, it is time to continue the show, breaking down the offensive skill players I have going in the first round of my latest combine-related mock draft for Sporting News that you can check out in full. It's up there, a two-rounder. We will break down the second round and the players that go there on the next show. We go to number 7, where the Raiders are picking, and I have them taking Will Levis out of Kentucky. He is a Penn State transfer that settled in, and they really liked what he did in Kentucky, really led the Wildcats, put up some nice numbers here. The Raiders in the market to replace Derek Carr, who was talking to teams in the combine, hoping to latch on to someone here after the trade with the Saints didn't work out. Meanwhile, the Raiders move on here. It's not going to be Jarrett Stidham as their starting quarterback, even though he had that title for the last 2 games of the season, and he fits in Josh McDaniels' system. Will Levis can remind him a little bit of Mac Jones in handling that, and Jones did have his best year early. Well, he's had 2 years, but definitely Josh McDaniels was a positive impact on him. So now, Will Levis, a similar prospect, maybe a little bit stronger arm, a better pocket presence overall. So look at that. The Raiders could plug and play. And if it's Levis, look at the weapons here. Devontae Adams, Darren Waller, Hunter Renfrow, some pretty good weapons all around. Colton Miller being a pretty good tackle there that they could get some help with their pass protection, but also a good receiver out of the backfield, Josh Jacobs, there with the options there. So the Raiders certainly have some weapons to look at. If Derek Carr had some reasonable fantasy value, then it would suggest, if it's a rookie in there, looking specifically at Levis, that he would have a chance to produce. So the Colts and Raiders, as you get deeper in the draft, we know these teams are a little bit better, have a little bit more in the pass game around the quarterback to help them. So not necessarily we're going to go in the order straight down Young, Stroud, Richard, and Levis in terms of their fantasy football impact, but their landing spots to get the most support. And the Raiders also could be a candidate to trade up for that number 1 overall pick and get Young. So the Colts or Raiders move up to get Young. Young is going to have a lot of appeal as a fantasy football starter. All right, let's go to pick number 9. Anytime I mock this player, he's with polarizing. It is Michael Mayer, the dominant tight end from Notre Dame. I love this kid, watching him play. He just takes over games. He's a beast in the red zone. He's fiery. He's strong. He's a very good blocker here. So he's going to make any offense instantly better. Now, the Panthers are out of luck on these 4 quarterbacks. You got to get an impact plan. I get they have Tommy Tremble, but they need a special receiver to help DJ Moore. I mean, Terrace Marshall Jr. is okay, but he's not that dominant number 2 yet. He's still coming in his own. Michael Mayer can be that key target to help DJ Moore get open more around the field. So really, Mayer and that field stretching ability. We also know Frank Reich likes to collect tight ends. We've seen that in the past. Thomas Brown as well knows the importance there, with Tyler Higbee being a key pass catcher for the Rams, as Brown came from Los Angeles. So Michael Mayer definitely could have an impact. We saw Travis Kelce win another Super Bowl here, a lot of impact coming from the tight end there. Before Kelce, you had Rob Gronkowski, Higbee making some plays there last year. So Michael Mayer is the guy that you're looking at there for the Panthers as an option if they can't get the quarterback there at number 9 overall. At number 12, I have the Texans taking a wide receiver to pair with their quarterback. In this case, it would be C.J. Stroud as the quarterback in this mock, but they could move up to get Young. Fortunately, they can't get Caleb Williams. The Heisman Trophy winner is not draft eligible at USC, but they can get his go-to guy, Jordan Addison, the Blitnikoff winner who transferred from Pittsburgh, had a big year at USC with Williams. I still think he's a first-round pick. He's a complete receiver. You can put him anywhere. He can stretch the field. He can work from inside, outside, good hands, good routes here for Addison. So I think he's a complete receiver. That's why the Texans could consider him as a number 1. They really don't have a true one, especially if they move Brandon Cooks here, who was disappointing and ended last year on a shaky note. So get your quarterback some help right away when you have 2 picks. They got to get better offensively. I know the Texans have some holes defensively, but when you look at that combination of Stroud, Addison, or any of the other quarterbacks, say Richardson or Young, you're in good shape here for Houston. So that would be a good connection to watch right away. So you want to get that young quarterback help. We saw the benefit when the Bengals drafted T. Higgins in the 2nd round after Burrow, then followed it up with Joe Burrow getting Jamar Chase in the reunion there. So Jordan Addison, I like him at number 12. Now you have another receiver. This may be a little bit of a surprising pick, going at number 13 to the Jets. That's Quentin Johnson. He's a big target, 6'4", 215, 225, that range here. That's good because Corey Davis, they can get out of his contract pretty easily. I'd rather move on if I'm the Jets and just say, look, we've got our number 1 clear in Garrett Wilson. He's a good overall player. Elijah Moore can give us a lot more out of the slot. We've got some other options there inside. Let's get a big field stretcher for the outside here that can replace Davis, give us a little bit more speed, a little bit of youth, and a little bit of durability that Davis does not have going back to his days as a first-round pick, number 5 overall himself for the Titans. So Quentin Johnson, maybe an opportunity here, maybe a draw that young veteran quarterback or an old veteran quarterback such as Aaron Rodgers, they'll have to make that move before. But you think if they try to upgrade quarterback with Derek Carr or someone else, that they need to continue to upgrade the receiving core after getting Moore 2 years ago, Wilson last year, and then you had Johnson. This would be a special young receiving core in the making. So a lot of good stuff that we check out here with the middle of the 1st round through number 16 overall. So we get back-to-back with Addison and Johnson as the top 2 wide receivers on the board. We still have to break down one more receiver, and we'll do that I have going in the 1st round when we look at our final look at the 1st round in our final segment here on Locked On Fantasy Football. Also, we'll talk about the 2 running backs that could be off the board in the 1st round. I really like both these guys' talent as workhorse guys, so we'll get into that for you for sure. Again, make sure you're checking out all the great shows on the network. Locked On NFL Draft, a big week for them at the Combine, bringing you all the insight and information you need on the latest prospects. So check it out, Locked On NFL Draft here on the network. And we're going to be talking draft as well, crossing over on Locked On Fantasy Football. Okay, it is time to close the show here, looking at the last 3 players that I have at skill positions going in the 1st round. So we've had 4 quarterbacks, we've had a tight end, we've had 2 wide receivers. Time to go into 1 more wide receiver. This is Jackson Smith-Njigba. He's going at the 23rd spot to the Chargers. Really, it's the 22nd pick because the Dolphins forfeit number 21. So Jackson Smith-Njigba might be an interesting or questionable pick for the Chargers, but there's a chance that they could cut or trade Keenan Allen given this contract. So there's that. They also have a window here that they can attack teams with Allen if they keep him in the mix with Mike Williams, and they need a 3rd receiver they can rely upon consistently. I know they had some moments from Josh Palmer. They've had DeAndre Carter, but Carter's a free agent. Palmer is a little bit limited here. Jalen Guyton coming off a major injury. Again, this is also keeping in mind that Allen could be on the move here soon. He's getting a little bit older. Smith-Njigba is a very good overall receiver, can work the inside and the outside here, much like Garrett Wilson was for the Jets coming out of the same program at Ohio State. So that'll be very intriguing. Of course, it would boost the value of Justin Herbert, however it breaks down. If he keeps Allen Williams with a receiver such as Njigba, you're in total business for bigger numbers here. They also could move on from Gerald Everett at tight end, so that could be more 11 personnel with Kellen Moore and their new offensive coordinator and open things up for all 3 receivers here. So we see the Cowboys at times support 3 receivers, but it's been rather inconsistent. Maybe Moore wanted to go to a little bit more explosive team with 2 reliable wide receivers. So looking at Jackson Smith-Njigba would be a good pickup there for the Chargers at that 22nd pick. All right. Finally, we're going to close with the 2 running backs I have going in the 1st round, and they both have 1st-round grades. Everywhere you look, these guys are 1-2, and I don't think that order is going to change too much. These are 2 workhorses from college who were very productive. Bijan Robinson, a little bit more so at Texas. He was the man. He was a dominant force there. Didn't get in the Heisman conversation because of the Longhorns not being as relevant or productive here. So when you look at that, I have him going 26 to the Cowboys. And why the Cowboys? There's still talk of Ezekiel Elliott maybe cutting him if they cannot restructure his contract. So something to look at there with Zeke. And then the other thing is Tony Pollard is a free agent. So two things that are developing there for the Cowboys were, is it smarter to just use this pick here to get that one back who can do a little bit of everything, let Pollard walk and not sign him, or maybe bring Pollard as a change of pace and keep him in his role, let Robinson be the new Ezekiel Elliott here? Is it a luxury pick for Jerry Jones? We know he's made this pick in the past before when he took CeeDee Lamb, when he had Amari Cooper and Michael Gallup. So it's not past Jerry Jones to do this here. He's also in Texas. They're going to have a close eye on him. And in the draft process, they've already seen him perform well from Austin and playing there with the Longhorns. So the Cowboys are going to be in tune with Bijan Robinson. They know he's going to be available in their wheelhouse there in the late first round, even though Robinson has a top 10 grade. I don't think teams are going to jump on a running back too early based on that. But if you drop him a little bit and near the bottom of the first round, that makes a lot of sense. So Robinson immediately, if that happens, and wherever he goes, really, if it's a reasonable team that where he's the lead, where he's not worried about another guy, I think the Cowboys would clean house to make that happen. Then you're looking at him as immediate RB1 with the volume ahead for Bijan Robinson. Now, I didn't know what to do with the 31st slot. It's really the 30th pick overall for the Eagles with that Dolphins forfeiture of their pick. But I looked at Miles Sanders being a free agent. Boston Scott is also a free agent. You also have Kenneth Gainwell, a little bit of change of pace guy, but is he a power guy that can really complement Jalen Hurts and lead their run-heavy charge here and be a little bit more explosive with fresher legs than Sanders? I wouldn't say so. I think right now is a change of pace. He needs some help if Scott and Sanders are not there. So how about Jahmyr Gibbs? I really like this kid. Has some explosive qualities as well, a little bit of home run ability. Sanders has that too, but Gibbs comes in a younger package. I think might be a better overall player that can also contribute in the passing game. So you're not telegraphing things where Sanders was not involved too much as a receiver. So Gibbs on the Eagles would be fantastic. You would just see him produce. I mean, Miles Sanders had a big season finally by staying healthy now. They move on from Sanders and get Gibbs in there with Jalen Hurts. He's going to have that trickle-down production from the rushing that Hurts has with the touchdown. Maybe this pushing thing will happen less for the Eagles, and we'll see Gibbs pop in on the shorter touchdowns from time to time there with Hurts. But, yeah, so we started with Bryce Young. We end up with his teammate from Alabama, and Gibbs going to another Alabama quarterback there with the Eagles and Hurts. So I'm excited to see these guys land on better teams. These better teams need to put them in position to succeed, with the Cowboys trying to move on from Elliott and Pollard, potentially the Eagles maybe moving on from Sanders and Scott. So interesting that I have both of these backs, the top two consensus backs here, 1, 2, going to the rivals in the NFC East, but definitely that possibility is there. You could also look at the Giants maybe later if they pass on or cannot agree to terms with the Saquon Barkley, that they could look at either of these guys as a replacement as well. So running backs, I think it just depends from draft to draft. I don't think they've lost value. There's just very few running backs now that can live up to that first-round value. I think with Robinson and Gibbs, you have two rare guys that can do that. And at worst, I think these guys are early second-round picks. So there you have it. There's a breakdown of the offensive skill players that I have going in the first round of my latest mock draft for Sporting News. We'll come back tomorrow, the next show, breaking down the second-round picks that they're pertaining to fantasy football and guys that throw, pass, and catch that you need to be aware of here. So it's kind of also a primer on all these players and what can they do in certain situations here as rookies and how quickly their impact might be. So that's how we're looking at the draft from our perspective on Locked On Fantasy Football. Thanks for making us your first listen every day. We're free and available to you on all platforms. Now make your second listen Locked On NFL Draft. Damian Parson and Keith Sanchez provide in-depth coverage of the biggest NFL draft prospect with deep dives into sleepers and hidden gems that you can see changing your favorite NFL franchise. Find Locked On NFL Draft wherever you get your podcast and on YouTube. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. For Locked On Fantasy Football, this has been Vinnie Iyer with a breakdown of our first-round offensive skill players, the latest mock draft. We'll come back tomorrow looking at round 2.